Alright, so here, I have a webcam now, so the visual is a little different. Welcome to the background of what I call my trailer. I have labeled myself as a project manager to deal with getting my mother-in-law home and finish dealing with the estate. I don't want to go there. It's just too depressing. It's what I live. But I just watched a video I have made on time. And I don't talk a lot about the things of that nature. So I thought maybe I'd make a video about my approaches to computer modeling for anyone who's into computers. Now, I am not that skilled in programming, just so you know. I'm trying to quit smoking. For all those who are like going, oh, why do you smoke a cigarette in your video? Anyways, here, vape. It helps. Anyways. I have this, like I said, since 1992 in Nebuchadnezzar. I have been trying to understand concepts about modeling human concept for the sake of artificial intelligence, for the sake of creating, everybody knows a Loebner, I think it's called Loebner. It's the test for artificial intelligence. Yes, I do have a cigarette burning too, alright? I'm going to cut that out. I don't know. Anyways, so, my approach to computer concept, to human concept modeling, I studied the brain a bit, in the way the brain works. The brain, I can't remember where I read it. I read it once that it said that the concept and the idea of Marilyn Monroe lives in one neuron in your brain. And that, like, say, if I think the concept vehicle, that is a general space in my brain. And now you take that point of vehicle and then you go out from it, then it starts to overlap with other concepts like that. So, in a way, it's a lot like having a set. You know, a vehicle is a term and a concept that includes car, boat, truck, plane, train. They are all vehicles. And conceptually speaking, a book is a vehicle for information. So that term of vehicle has a sphere of influence, so to speak, which overlaps other things, which creates a place in the brain for that connectedness. Now, the most recent and most extensive work. Let me start with some of the approaches I've taken. Which one are they? I'm going to say one of the first approaches I took. I called it a zip cube. I remember sitting at my job contemplating how objects in the world are actually defined by the things that are around them, meaning the object itself doesn't necessarily exist, save for how it is in contrast to the other objects. I know. So I thought, what about if you had like a cube? And just think of it, it's really just a very large three-dimensional array for programmers. It's a very large three-dimensional array in which you have a list of concept elements against a list of concept elements, the same list, both X and Y, if you want to look at it that way. And the Z axis of this cube, of this three-dimensional array, is what I call the depth, the charge, the interactive nature of each element. Now, if you had two elements, like blue and sky, or how about we just say sky and day? Let's just use those two simplistic ideas. So you have this concept of blue, or sky, and this concept of day. They are part of the concept, and they are in X, Y, and then there's an intersect point where I can draw up from sky and over from day. And when they meet, the underlying configuration of the depth will automatically bring indication to blue. Because daytime, and I know there's other things involved, don't get me on that. Yes, is it clear, is it cloudy? Yeah, that's the complexity of it. I'm talking simplicity. But that's what it was. Now, And I called it zipping it together, because you take those two and you zip them together, and they create a new depth based on the combination of day and sky. All right, now let's say you've got this new combination, which really doesn't exist in the pre-existent cube, but is now accumulated context of those two zipped together, so they're underlying bits in depth that interact. So now you're going to zip the concept of clear with those two, and the resultant underlying bit depth indicate blue. So you got day, sky, zip together, then zip it with clear, and then the resultant is blue. It's really just an associative thing that oh, this and this and this and this caused this to come up. And that was an old thing that I tried. I'm smoking my cigarette, don't look. So that was an older concept, which I tried, had some success in certain ways, and I just kind of set aside. I also explored the notion of what I call DCIOS. It's the idea of intensity. Oh, that was Kiddiff. DCIOS is something else. Kiddiff. Kiddiff is a concept of intensity. The fact that intensities all are sort of generically cross-associative. Size, brightness, distance, velocity, all of those are expressions that can be linked in a sense of their underlying nature and similarities. So I was exploring that. The DCIOS was more of a trying to attempt to, I think in conjunction with Kiddiff, trying to develop much like an XML, a tagged system of organization on a page that would give indications to logic and association. I didn't have a lot of success with that, except for the concept. One other concept that I did explore even further back was the notion of generic relationals, because you have to understand that when you start dealing with concept and association and concept, something that's off to the right a distance, something that's up in the air a distance, really do share a similar. The only defining nature of it is its dimensional qualities. One is vertical dimension to our subjective point of view, and one is a horizontal dimension according to our subjective point of view. However, they share what I would call the Kiddiff expression of distance, in a sense, in either way, which then is part of the underlying cross-associated process, but just defined everywhere. Again, I get in and then I forget where I'm at. We're going to pause for a second and come back. Okay, so all you people would say, why are you smoking? I'm getting up. I put the cigarette down there and use my vape. Okay, so the more recent approach I've taken, the one that I've worked probably more on than any, it's what I call the web. It's really a node-based web, wherein each node represents conceptual idea. On the surface level, you have to have vocabulary, linguistic, node concept interaction with the conceptual layers. So you have a list of vocabulary. You know, a word, color, the word blue, the word sky, are all labels for a conceptual idea, and they are linguistically connected. So the point is that you charge each linguistic vocabulary node, and then you run the cycle of the process of the web. The web then throws charges through the web based on that into other conceptual nodes, and then you can try and read the web for what it is contextually. That's pretty general to the process of it. But so within this web, there are 4 distinct types of connection to try to, and I'm going to say that this is the process that I've had the most success with. Within this web, I have 4 types. The implied connection. The implied connection is actually a direct implication to another conceptual node, and that can have conditional aspects to it. Meaning that if I got node A is charged and it has its connections that go off into other nodes, that one of those node connections might be an implied conditional, meaning that, all right, I'm going to check this connection and say that I will send this charge from this node to this other node if this third node is also charged. It's an if then. If this is lit, then this lit node will send a charge onward and then flow. Now, you have to mind you too that everything is top down. Every flow is a flow downward. So the implication charge, even being direct, actually flows in a directional sense. Downward direction. Okay. The second type of connection is a set node. Very much in what we know as sets in mathematics and logic. And I will use vehicle again. Vehicle is the primary first node, and now it has connections in set mode to car, truck, boat. Alright, so you charge the vehicle node, it throws a charge down into all the other constituent parts. Why? Because vehicle implies all of those things, and all the connections for all those subparts within the set also have validity within the web. Now, what if I charge car within that? Charge car flows up into vehicle, but vehicle does not throw the charge back down because car is already defined as a principal part of the context, and boat and train and truck and all that do not apply. However, the generic connections of vehicle do. So it'll flow up into vehicle, but it will not flow back down into the rest. Vehicle will flow out and all its rest of its connections into the web, and then the context of the web will be more accurate. I learned that the hard way. What the hell? Oop, we got to fix that. Anyways, the third and fourth are basically of the same ilk. They're called the merge connection, and this is based on my research of the brain and the way the brain overlaps. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Vehicle connected to water could bring up boat because that is a specific, more specific node to vehicle that is merged with the notion of water. So a merged node is basically two charged nodes that flow into a singular node, and that node has a threshold of how many other nodes are connected into it. So that if I were to charge, in that example of vehicle and water, if I only charged water, now that water is going to flow into the merged node of boat, but boat is only going to have a half charge possible secondary charge. There are two. Each node carries an actual charge and a possible charge. So the water flows into the boat node and giving it a 0.5 charge of possible. And so now that sits as in that 0.5 charge of possible is now a potential within the web. So everything that boat flows to, because boat is not technically fully charged, but it does have the possible 0.5 charge. So now every time I process the node of boat, it will send its diminishing possible charge into its parts. So now you have this possible context coming up, because sometimes in conversation, I have a friend who's on Steam and asking me questions. Shut up, Tim. Anyways, I had an interruption. So now you have this possible like pseudo charge going through the web as well as the actual context, which then gives the interpretation. Because every time we talk, we don't always include all the information, but if there is something else in the context that could give rise to it, that possible charge is going to give indication to it. Now here's an aspect of the web. Now the fourth merge is actually just a sequential version of that one, meaning that the only way that a merged node will charge is if the supplying nodes actually fire in sequence, and that's something I was working on for language processing. because sometimes the order of words has a significance in the concept. All right, let's set the connections aside. Let's talk about the charge through the web. Now, the actual charge, which is like saying this node is valid, the concept involved with this node is valid. And then the potential charges are saying that this node may be in reference, but there may be a piece missing. So let's consider it as a possibility. The other part of this that has been beneficial is what I call an upward charge. Think of it as an echo through the web. So you have an actual charge that flows down. You have a possible charge that flows down. Now, every time the charge flows into a node, that node echoes back up to its source and all sources of it an upward charge that indicates to it. So I might have a node over here that's not even involved in the original charging context, but it will receive an upward charge because it's getting information through the web, through possibles, and then flowing back up into it saying, hey, I wasn't originally involved, but I may be involved. And I think that's important in trying to piece together ideas and circumstances that are incomplete, much in the way neural networks work in understanding and seeing patterns, noise or incomplete. So now you've got the upward charge, you've got the probable charge, and you've got... so the significance in that is I can talk about something that has to do with color, the sky and the blue and all of that, but I can actually check the node for color to see if blue has any, what colors are being indicated through the upward charge. So, so the context in the question may be about color, and the other information thrown into the web flows down and through, the upward echo charge comes up. And now I look at color. Now color, when I check all of its contexts, all of its connections, and all of the up charges coming up through it, I say, oh look, red is being indicated higher than the rest. So whatever that is may be connected to that connection down through. It just gives logical and probable and possible. It's not probable. I'm going to be careful of that because probability is a completely different thing from when I'm talking about the possible. It doesn't follow the rules of probability, but it is in a sense a probable in the generic and layman term of probable. But I like to use possible to avoid that confusion because somebody's going to go, well, that's not probability. I know it's not. Anyways, that is what I call a web, but that was what I worked on for quite some time before I let the whole project go. I have revisited it all. And I have been approaching it based on the experience I've had with that experience. And I have begun to separate out the linguistic charge. When you charge all the linguistic nodes pertaining to, in order and all of that, it will flow into a conceptual engine, so to speak. That conceptual engine will cause the flows to happen conceptually. And there's another concept that I'm going to introduce here in a minute. And then it will flow through and create a context within this web. And there's like 3 things. I'm going to stop for a second. Okay, so I'm going to come back and talk about the side thing, commonality, which is very similar to the idea of the generic relational things, like up and down and to the side, that generic expression of relationship, which I think is important to define those and include those. Commonality is the idea that to walk, to run, to stroll, to go, all carry the common notion. Now, if you have a commonality list, which is a list in terms within, and then you say, okay, because the linguistic node that's being charged fits into this particular commonality. Now you have to use a symbolic way to represent that commonality. The confusing part of this is that's hard is you're starting to leave established term linguistically. So you're like trying to, how do I define that without trying to define it too precisely? I could use a pseudo, like everything run, walk, stroll will be go. But they all apply. Because you also have the sense that run also means to operate, as in a machine. To run a machine, to operate a machine. So the word and the term and the linguistic node of run is going to be a part of both of those commonality lists. So the idea is to take every linguistic node and pass it through the commonality filter to establish it in commonality symbology, and that the conceptual layer will be based on commonality, which then increases the generic general ability to cross-associate. Boy, I hope I made sense. I actually understand what I'm saying, but when I look back on what I've said, I go, huh. So that is kind of where I'm at, because what I have done as of late is start to take what I initially did in my web was I had just basically an elemental node, which was an element, and then I would create all the associative connections and merges and implications and all that, and I would do that manually or on like a little scripted page that the program could read and incorporate into the program. But I would have the file of elemental nodes and all their charges and all their information pertaining to it, and then I would have each of those would have a connection file, which would then have all the connections it has and the types of stuff like that. I'm trying to get rid of the connection file and replace it with what I call a conceptual page or an experiential page. And this is where the XML notion comes in, or the AI, ML, whichever, it's the same principle. Tagged and visually more understanding. It's not a file's, putting into and being in that format. Something that you can kind of write on your own and then put in a folder and have the program recognize as an experience. Now the concept file, the concept page, what I call it, the memory page, they're both the same. I haven't quite, because they have nuances of difference, but I'm not quite sure what I mean in those differences yet. But they have little kernels of stuff. Like you could type in the words "run to the store," and it will point to a page of run to the store. But within that page, it's going to have little kernels of the pieces of running to the store. Wherein, like, one kernel might actually be about buying something, and then there's links of that. Now these pages link to other conceptual nodes, because the nodes themselves are the generic placeholders that reference these pages, and they are the things that carry the charges. I'm at the threshold now of where I'm working on and what I'm thinking about. But I kind of wanted to share this. I probably went on long. I'll probably have to edit it a little bit. But I don't get a lot of chance to talk about this stuff, because if I bring it up to anyone, they go, "Oh, that's nice," and then they walk away. And if you're still watching, you might actually have an interest in it. And I don't feel so bad about the people that have already walked away, giving me that, "Oh, that's nice. I'd much rather macrame. See ya." Anyways, I just realized earlier today, because I like this book, How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. Einstein is one of my idols. I know his personal life is questionable, but I kind of respect that too. Same with Leonardo da Vinci. He was a little... So, it's not my intelligence. It's my appreciation of the things I enjoy that people just tend to say, "Wow, if you're into that, you must be smart." Truth is, no, I don't feel that smart when I indulge it. But I do enjoy the hell out of it. So I thought I'd present this tonight as something other than what I've been doing in the past. Music, writing, and advocating. So this goes along with the nature of time. Y'all have a good night.